Hey you, I'm so happy you're here. Today you and I are gonna be witness to the end of the battle of good versus evil. I'm Frank, come join me, we're gonna have a ton of fun. So before we solve the battle between good and evil, let's put all of this in context first. Is good versus evil even the right framework? Because good versus evil would imply that good is the opposite of evil. But is that actually completely correct? I would argue that that's not the case. The opposite of good would be bad. Just that, like the opposite of right is wrong. The opposite of evil is virtuous. And the virtuous are mostly considered selfless, and the evil ones are mostly considered selfish. We'll go more into detail on all of these terms in a second, so bear with me. So let's start with good versus bad. Is that something that is innate, or is that something that is taught? Well, you could say that good versus bad is innate, correct? Because everybody knows that something is good, and everybody knows that something is bad. But I would argue that that's not entirely the case. Good and bad are taught. Because if you take a situation in which two parties oppose each other, they will both think that they are doing the good thing. Like in wars, for example. One party says, okay, well, I'm doing a good thing, I'm defending my country. And the other says, well, I'm doing a good thing, I'm expanding my country, or I'm exporting my good ideas to this other country to free them, or to bring democracy, or to bring a certain type of religion, etc., etc. What I'm getting at is that everybody in a certain culture thinks that certain things are good and bad through normativity, meaning that there's an imposed way of thinking within the culture, and that culture selects this is good, this is bad. This is evidenced by the fact that good does not always align with right, and bad does not always align with wrong, because right and wrong are felt on a more personal level. For example, you can go to war for your country and that is considered good, but then when you shoot someone, you feel wrong. What I'm getting at is that good and bad are cultural perceptions, and right and wrong are personal perceptions. But they are perceptions. They don't have to be, because they have no real basis except for your perception. Because a situation A is neutral. Although I wouldn't say that it doesn't matter if you do good or bad or right or wrong, attaching an inherent value of that type is unnecessary. So then in the beginning, I mentioned that if you take this a step further, you have evil versus virtuous. And what are these then? I would argue that these are simply the archetypal villains and heroes that we tell in our cultural stories to propagate these ideas of good and bad and right and wrong. And the character traits that these figures exhibit is mostly one of selfishness for the evil ones and one of selflessness for the virtuous heroes. But this doesn't align, because in life you need to sometimes be selfish to at least get your own. And once you have the luxury to be selfless, then by all means do. But this selflessness can only be done if there is a baseline in place in which you can comfortably do that, unless you take the risk of sacrificing yourself or your surroundings. So what is my argument here? Well, I don't think that there is a good, bad, right, or wrong. And these are simply perceptions that we put upon ourselves, or that have been put upon us by society through archetypal heroes and villains that we characterize as virtuous and evil, and by making them selfless and selfish. Everybody likes selfless people because they do things for us and they enhance the structures of communities which we need to survive as a species, since on our own humans are not that well equipped to survive. We need to learn skills and we need to have knowledge to survive, and then some of us are apt to live all by ourselves. But the bulk of us are like herd animals. We need others to thrive, and that is why being selfless is important. Now, some would have you believe that if you abandon the ideas of good and bad and evil and virtuous, that the whole society comes crumbling down. But I don't agree with that. I think that by teaching people this narrative, you just teach them a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Instead, if we were to teach each other the values of cooperation directly, I think we could get much further ahead. And that is the basis of my argument. I'm very curious as to what you think. Leave it in a comment below. I'm very excited to learn what you have to say. If you enjoyed this video, check around the channel. I have more philosophy related content. I really appreciate you watching this video, and I'll see you in the future. Bye.